Hey, welcome back to Homeschool Wherever. My name is Sognonvi, and in today's video, I am wearing this silly getup because I am going to be telling you all about our unit study on Jacques Cousteau. So for those of you who are not familiar with Jacques Cousteau, he is a very famous ocean explorer. He pretty much invented scuba diving. He was also very influential in the development of underwater photography and cinematography. He became an Oscar-winning filmmaker. He became a television star. The guy had a really interesting life. So the reason we decided to do a unit study on Jacques Cousteau actually ties into a trip that we did in October. I knew that we would be doing a trip to Puerto Vallarta in Mexico to work with a couple of properties there. And in that area, there's a really famous group of islands called the Marianas Islands. And these islands are famous not only because they have really interesting marine life, but also because there is this very famous hidden beach. And it's very striking because it kind of looks like there's a hole in the ceiling. And the way that this relates back to Jacques Cousteau is that the reason that these weird formations happened is because this site used to be used for military testing. So they used to test bombs and things like that here. And Jacques Cousteau was actually very instrumental in activism to help to stop military testing in this area to help save the marine life. So at the start of the month, I assumed that we would be able to go and do an excursion to see the Marianas Islands. Unfortunately, as we got closer to the trip and I did more research, I realized that there's actually an age limit where you have to be 12 and over to go and do this excursion. And the reason for that mainly is because there is this underwater tunnel you sort of have to swim through. So I guess you have to be a pretty strong swimmer, and younger kids could kind of freak out in that situation. So unfortunately, we were not able to do this as part of the trip. So that was a little bit disappointing. However, as I'm going to show you in the next video that's coming out on our channel, we still had a couple of really cool learning experiences which tied in with some of the things that we learned about oceans and marine life as part of this Cousteau unit study. If you're new to this channel, we are a multiracial secular family living in New York City, and we are homeschooling for the first time this year. We have two daughters, Sean, who's in 6th grade, and Ella, who's in 3rd grade. We're really passionate about using travel to bring our homeschool lessons to life. This channel is all about documenting our homeschooling journey, so if that sounds of interest to you, I hope you'll subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next video. Also, we work as full-time family travel creators, so if you want to see that side of our lives, check out our travel channel at Top Flight Family. The beanie had to come off because I was getting a little sweaty. As you can see, I'm a little shiny over here. So for this unit study, the main book that we used was Who Was Jacques Cousteau by Nico Medina. The Who Was books are a very popular series for kids. They're basically a series of biographies that are written in a way that's very accessible for kids. And this was actually our very first time reading a Who Was book, and I have to say they really live up to the hype. The text is written in a way that's very accessible, and so even though we decided to do it as a read aloud, I think certainly both of my girls would have been able to read this on their own as well. And even though the text is very accessible, I find that they still include a lot of detail about the person's life. So it's not like they're dumbing down the content in any way. So I think it really strikes that great balance between accessibility and then also depth. Now there's a couple of other great resources on Jacques Cousteau, which I'm going to recommend. And they are Manfish, A Story of Jacques Cousteau by Jennifer Byrne and Eric Poubaré. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. And this is just a really beautifully illustrated and beautifully written book. It's a picture book, and I think it's a little bit more sort of on the poetic, artistic side. Still has, facts in there, but I think it's a great supplement to, a straight up biography of Cousteau. Another great book is The Fantastic Undersea Life of Jacques Cousteau by Dan Yacarino. This one also has really cool illustrations, and I actually think that both of these books could be great jumping off points for art projects related to Jacques Cousteau, because the illustrations are done in such a unique way that I think it could be really inspiring to kids to kind of mimic that style. Another great resource on Cousteau is Honest History, which you may be familiar with. It's sort of a kids magazine, I guess, but issue number 7 of Honest History has a lot of information about Jacques Cousteau, so that's another great resource to look into. Now, in addition to the books about Cousteau himself, we also supplemented with lots of books about oceans and marine life, and I'm going to share some of those that we found most useful. The Big Book of the Blue by Yuval Zomer. This is a beautifully illustrated book and just really has interesting facts about oceans and marine life. Whales, An Illustrated Celebration by Kelsey O'Seed is another great one. And of course, DK has a couple of really great books about oceans and marine life. If you're not familiar with DK, they are a publishing company, and they really specialize in putting out kids' books that are kind of like really great, like oversized, illustrated reference books like encyclopedias, and they're just super engaging the way it's designed. The pictures really draw you in, but then there's also so much information that goes along with it. So DK books are always kind of a go-to for us, especially for any kind of reference material. So two books in particular that we use for this unit study are Ocean, or A Watery World as You've Never Seen It Before, and Ocean by Miranda McKitty. So what did we actually do during this unit study? So I already mentioned that our main book was the Who Was Jacques Cousteau biography. And so we did a read aloud of that and really learned about his life. And that book definitely covers quite a lot. But in addition to that, we kind of supplemented with some outside sources since that book keeps things pretty positive. I also wanted to make sure that my girls had kind of a balanced view of this person's life. And one of the things that I really want my girls to understand is that humans are flawed. Humans are not perfect. So even the people that we uphold as heroes because they had tremendous accomplishments in particular areas, those people may have not been that successful in other parts of their lives. And the way that this translates for Cousteau himself is that one big thing that is sort of, it's not left out of the Who Was biography, but it's sort of like glossed over, is the fact that just a few months after his wife died, he married someone else. And the reason that this happened so quickly is because Cousteau actually had a whole second secret family for like 10 to 15 years, and his wife and his kids had no idea. So, you know, professionally, he was very accomplished, but, you know, his personal life was a little more complicated. Another thing that we talked about is the fact that even though later in life, Cousteau became very much regarded as I guess, an environmentalist of sorts, you know, someone who really was pushing for conservation and helping to save marine life, preserve marine life. In the earlier part of his career, a lot of his projects were actually funded by oil companies. So for example, he did several different projects that involved actually creating underwater structures where him and his colleagues would actually live underwater for a period of weeks or months. And these projects were funded by oil companies because they wanted to figure out how to more efficiently, essentially, extract oil out of the ocean floor by having their workers live down there instead of going up and down all the time and using up so much time. So I think that when we introduce our kids to historical figures, there's nothing wrong with adding in some of this complexity to show that, hey, listen, people are not like one-dimensional. People do really well in some areas and they make mistakes in other areas. Does that necessarily take away from their accomplishments? Depends, right, on the situation. I think there's a few public figures of note in recent years that I think we're all looking at very differently because of revelations that have come out. But I think kids are sophisticated enough to understand this, that yeah, you can do really great things without having to be perfect. So because my girls love art, we of course did some ocean-themed art projects as part of this unit study. One art project that was really fun was painting with markers. And this is a technique that I had seen online and I wanted to try it out. So basically if you use water-based markers. For example, the Crayola washable markers are great for this, which is what we used. The particular art project that we did is we scribbled onto a piece of foil, aluminum foil, with the markers. Then we wet a piece of watercolor paper, and then we basically transferred the marker onto the paper. So we press the foil into the paper, marker side down. And then when you lift it up, it creates kind of this really cool watercolor effect because it kind of bleeds into the water that's in the paper. So then we colored in some printouts of fishes and sharks and actually glued this onto the background once it was dry. And then we did a very similar project, also kind of a collage idea, and this was with actual watercolor paints. So I'm excited to start experimenting with actual watercolors. This was our first time using it as part of our homeschool. So again, you know, we did like a wash as a background. Sean experimented with more letting different colors bleed into each other, whereas Ella did sort of more of a traditional kind of gradient wash. And again, we colored in some printouts of coral reefs and things like that and stuck that on. Now, another fun project we did as part of this unit study was to find ocean facts. And this went so well that I think this is something that I'm probably going to incorporate into pretty much every future unit study. And the idea is that I really want my girls to get used to really flipping through books and extracting information on their own. So while read alouds are great and I think they're very engaging, the girls really absorb the information, I also want my girls to be able to do independent research. So I came up with this idea, very simple project. I gave them each a pad of Post-its. They had the stack of ocean books, and I asked them to find 5 to 10 interesting facts about the ocean or marine life and just whatever that, as they're flipping through, they're like, oh, this is kind of interesting. And to write it on a Post-it and then stick it up on our little cabinet there in the living room. And this was a fun project, and they definitely learned a lot through doing it. And I think it gave them really good practice in sort of skimming books and extracting information. So like I said, it's definitely something I'm going to be doing in future unit studies. And then for our final project for this unit study, as you may recall, last month we did a unit study on the disco era, and for the final project of that unit study, they ended up doing something that's kind of more traditional. Essentially, they made a poster with different facts and things like that. But for this one, I decided to switch it up and do something a little bit more creative, and that is I asked each of them to make a TikTok about Jacques Cousteau. They didn't have to publish it publicly if they didn't want, so they could leave it on private or leave it in their drafts. And I really left it up to them in terms of the content. So I told them you could either make a TikTok that's all about his life, you could make one that just shares simple facts about him, you could pick one specific part of what he did and share some information about that. And do you want to see what they came up with? Here it is.
Here's 8 fun facts about Jacques Cousteau. He was born June 11th, 1910. He spent time working in the Navy. He had 2 sons. He invented scuba diving. He broke 17 windows at school and got suspended. He almost died in a car crash. He invented underwater photography. And he lived underwater for a month. Bye-bye.
Your dreams, baby, get you and me. It's time to boss up. Fix your credit, girl, get at it. Get your bag up. Hit that gym and get back fine. Go get that degree. Go, girl, focus on me. Unlock, put.
Okay, so last month we did our unit study on the disco era, and if you want to learn why we picked that topic and how we went about studying it, just click that video right there. If you haven't already, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Give us a follow on both Instagram and TikTok. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.